Hey guys, I'm Meoang, and welcome back to my beginner's guide to Starcraft 2. Today we're going to be talking about control groups. Whenever I introduce somebody to the game, I always try to get them to use control groups as soon as possible. Half of them pick it up really quickly, and the other half just seem to refuse to keep on using them. The game is incredibly more difficult without control groups, and understanding how they work can go a long way. Before I go on, just remember that every keystroke related to control groups can be changed in the options menu. For now, I'm going to describe the default controls. A control group is a saved hotkey for a group of units and/or structures. You press the assign button to select the group, and you double tap the assign button to move your camera to the group. Control groups make your life a lot easier when it comes to managing your units and keeping constant production out of all your buildings. Without them, you'd have to be clicking all over the map, way more than is reasonable. By default, the control groups are assigned to the number keys 1 through 0. To create a control group, highlight the units or structures that you want to assign. Then you just hold Control and press whatever number you want to assign that group to. When selecting units or structures, hold Shift to select multiple ones, and double-click a unit or structure to highlight all other ones of the same type. For example, if I want to put my Marines and Marauders on a control group, I double-click one of the Marines, hold Shift, then double-click one of the Marauders. Once they're all selected, I'll hold Control and press 1. Now whenever I press 1, it selects these Marines and Marauders. If I double tap 1, it brings the camera to them. To add new units or structures to an existing control group, you hold Shift and then press the desired group. For example, if I want to add new Marines to the group that I just made, I'll select them all, hold Shift, then press 1. Now these new Marines are part of the group. To create a new control group that removes these units or structures from all other control groups, you use Alt. For example, if I decide I want some of my Marines to be on a new control group for a drop or something, I highlight those Marines, hold Alt, then press 2. Now those Marines no longer belong to Control Group 1 and instead are on Control Group 2. All of these methods work exactly the same way with buildings. When you have multiple buildings of the same type on a control group, it allows you to produce from all of those buildings easily. For example, if I have all of my bases on 4 and I want to make more probes, I just have to hit 4, then press E once for every base. This way you don't have to go through each individual building. If you have multiple buildings of different types on the same control group, you can press Tab to cycle through them. For example, if I want my barracks and factories on the same control group, let's say 5, I just have to push 5, make whatever I want from the barracks, then press Tab and make whatever I want from the factories. Whether or not you put different production buildings on the same control group is up to you. For example, for Terran, some people prefer slightly more precision by putting all of their barracks on one control group, all of their factories on another control group, and all of their starports on another control group. Other people prefer condensing their control groups and will put all of those buildings on the same group. With that said, I highly recommend that you at least keep your bases on a control group of their own, maybe only paired with buildings that you don't access very often. Now that you understand how control groups work, I'm going to give you a few examples of setups for each race that beginners are often recommended to use. Terran can use several control groups depending on how you want to use them. I save groups 1 through 3 for my army so that I can split my army up depending on how I need it. For example, if I'm playing TVT and using mech, I'll put my Hellbats on 1, my siege tanks on 2, and my air units on 3. On control group 4, I put all of my command centers and maybe my upgrade buildings as well. From here on, there are 2 ways to do things. You can either put all of your production buildings, your barracks, factories, and starports, all on one control group 5, or you can put your barracks on 5, your factories on 6, and your starports on 7. Do whatever works for you. You don't need to worry about 8 through 0 right now, but if you feel the need, some people like to use those control groups for drops. Zerg is in the fortunate position of having all of their units come from the same building. To counteract this, you often have to devote a lot of your control groups to larva injecting. Once again, I save control groups 1 through 3 for army units. I put all of my hatcheries on control group 4, and sometimes I'll also put my upgrade buildings here as well. Now, there are several different ways to inject larvae using control groups, and I'll go over 3 of them here. The first method, often called the backspace method, is to put all of your queens on control group 5. To inject, you just press 5, then use the base camera key to cycle through your bases. At each base, you press V, then click on it, then move on to the next one using the base camera key. You should rebind your base camera key from backspace if you're going to do this. The major problem with this method is that it gives up control for speed. You'll be able to inject quickly, but if one of your queens doesn't have enough energy, you'll accidentally send another one of your queens across the map. You can press the S key when you're done with all of your bases to counteract this, but then you're still missing an inject at least one of your bases. The other method is to put each of your individual queens that are used for injecting on their own control groups. For example, the queen at your first base will be on 5, the queen on your second base will be on 6, the queen at your third base will be on 7, and so on. This is something of a middle ground between control and speed. You'll always know if an individual queen doesn't have energy yet, and it doesn't take very long to hit 5-5 V-click, 6-6 V-click, 7-7 V-click, and so on. The obvious downside to this method is that it only allows you space for 6 bases, so if you go beyond that for some reason, you'll have to figure out something on the fly. The last method is to instead bind each of your individual hatcheries to control groups 5 through 0. You still keep all of your hatcheries in control group 4 though, you just have an additional control group for each of your hatcheries. This is extremely similar to the method I mentioned before, but it is different in 2 ways. The first is that it makes this easier to see when your larva injects have finished, and the second is that it forces you to click on the queen near your base before injecting. Try them all out and decide which one is easiest for you. I personally hotkey each individual queen, but that's only because it's the method I started with in Wings of Liberty. Protoss control groups are extremely similar to Terran. The only difference is that warp gates have their own dedicated hotkey, which is W by default. Once again, we put our army on control groups 1 through 3 and our Nexi on control group 4 along with upgrade buildings. Now we can either use 5 for both robotics facilities and stargates, or put robotics facilities on 5 and stargates on 6. Along with these, we use the W key to select our warp gates and warp in gateway units. And that's all there really is to it. It's not a terribly complicated concept, but it's so incredibly important to use. You really cannot play this game very effectively without control groups. If you want to learn more about how to take advantage of your 3 army control groups, I have a video coming up that goes over how to micromanage your units. If any of these units or structures I mentioned are unclear to you, I also have videos coming up that describe the tech trees of the 3 races. Thanks for watching guys, and good luck picking up the game.